Let's talk about Mythic Mischief, a clever strategy game about manipulating your opponent. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald. In this episode, we're going to talk about a very clever strategy game that just delivered on Kickstarter not too long ago. In fact, I received my copy just before I visited Montreal for Ludicon. This was a game actually that was suggested to me by a viewer, Jay Tatum for Real, so thanks for suggesting this one. And it's a game from IV Studios. This is the first IV Studios game that I've played, a game called Mythic Mischief, and this is volume 2. So there are multiple volumes of Mythic Mischief, and all of the factions can work together. They're interchangeable from one game to another. Mythic Mischief is a game for between 1 and 4 players. There are solo rules in the box. Games take 45 to 90 minutes to play, and it works with kids age 14 and up. This is a strategy game. Let's take a deeper look at Mythic Mischief Volume 2 from IV Studios. Mythic Mischief is a rules-light strategy game, but the strategy itself is much heavier. So it does hit a sweet spot for us, where the rules are simple to explain and understand, but there's some deep strategy there. So it's probably medium level overall. What you're trying to do in Mythic Mischief, in Volume 2, you're running through a hedge maze, trying to avoid the groundskeeper. Everyone's playing as students at Mythic Manor, and you're trying to prank your friends so that they get caught by the groundskeeper, but you do not. You are trying to win this game by earning 10 mischief points. You are getting up into trouble in the garden here. Or you want to have the most points once the groundskeeper has reached his final objective. That's when the game's going to end. Volume 2 of Mythic Mischief includes 4 factions. You've got fairies and gargoyles, you've got werewolves, and there are gnomes in the game as well. The rulebook has some silly story about each of these characters. The werewolves are a punk band, and one of them is the hall monitor at Mythic Manor. So they've got a little silly story about each one. But the factions are asymmetric. They're simple to the abilities are simple to understand here, though. Everybody has an ability to move their own figures on the board. There's going to be an ability to move or manipulate your opponent's figures. You've also got the ability to move bookshelves in Volume 1, or in this case it's hedges in the hedge maze in Volume 2. You can move those around, and finally you can distract the groundskeeper and force the groundskeeper to move somewhere. There are a couple of super special abilities at the bottom of each of the faction cards. One can only be used after dark, once the groundskeeper has reached his third objective on the board. The other is one where you're going to put one of your cubes in here. The cubes are little tomes. They're little books that you would find at the library, and you spend a tome to use this ability. So the legendary ability that each faction has is one that's not going to be used as often as these other ones that are going to pop up every turn, and that's because you have to spend a tome to use it. Now, if you get another tome, you can see that there are tomes here on the board. If you manage to grab another one of your tomes, you can slot it in there and use that ability again, but you've got a limited number of those tomes in the game. There are lots of options for setup. You can even draft the pieces here to set up the environment. There are several different examples of ways that you can place the hedges and these little cluttery obstacles at the beginning of the game before everything starts. And then once you've set up the hedges, you've got a deck of before dark and after dark cards, and that's going to dictate where the tomes are going to go on the map that you can collect and improve your board. It's also going to indicate where the groundskeeper is going to go. The groundskeeper has 3 objectives that he's moving towards, and they're numbered 1, 2, and 3. You can see those on the map. Those locations are dictated by this before dark card at the start of the game. There's a deck of those cards, so there's variable setup. The after dark card is one that only gets flipped over, and again, there's a deck of these, so everything is set up at random. There's lots of variation and replayability here. Once the groundskeeper gets to its third objective, then you're going to flip the after dark card face up. Characters will then have access to their after dark ability. You're going to replace some new tomes. You'll put some new tomes out on the board, and the groundskeeper's objectives are going to change to different locations. The game's going to end, like I said earlier, when the groundskeeper reaches its third objective, then the team with the most points will win, or if one of the players reaches 10 points. You're earning those points by forcing your opponent's characters into the path of the gatekeeper. That's what the mischief is in this game. You're really pranking your friends and hoping that they're going to get caught. There's nothing random here, and there's no real hidden information other than the fact that you've got this one face down card at the start of the game. So everyone knows what everyone else is going to be capable of. Everyone knows where the groundskeeper is going to go. And then you're just spending actions that are indicated on your board by the numbers on the dice. So the dice aren't really rolled in this game, except maybe at the beginning if you want to decide who's going to be the first player. They're just the number of actions that you can take in that row, in that category. So the gnomes can move a friend or an opponent to a different adjacent location. They can move a hedge to a different location on their first turn. And they've got a couple of movement points here as well. At the end of your turn, everything's going to reset back to 0. And then you're going to you have an opportunity to boost a couple of dice to increase their value on the turn. Now, what do you use these tomes for? Well, once you've taken all of your actions and everything's finished, these little cubes go onto your board and they set a new minimum that your dice are going to go down to at the end of your turn. So you might, if I put one of those tomes here in my movement section of the board, hopefully you'll be able to see that, that means that when my actions reset and all my dice are spent and my turn is done, the minimum number of movement points I can have at the start of my next turn is going to be 2 instead of 1. So you take your actions. You're going to score a point if you happen to be able to move an opponent into the groundskeeper. And then the groundskeeper is going to do his move. He's got a movement of 4 that's dictated here at the top of the card. He's going to move 4 spaces towards his next objective, following the shortest path. If he did happen to come across one of these figures in the game, then that figure is removed. It goes back to the player's board. The opposing player is going to get 1 point. You won't be able to see that, I'm sure. I don't think that the whole board shows up here on the map. The opposing player gets a point, but at the start of the werewolf's next turn, their figure will come back out onto the board again. So you're not eliminating any of the figures from the board. There's no real, there's lots of take that, let's be honest, is that the whole point of the game is to force your opponent into the groundskeeper's pathway, but you're not eliminating anything from the game. So those characters are all going to come back next time. There's no real penalty there other than the fact that you've got to find a space to put your character back out on the board, and it might not be the space that you wanted to start from. There's no limits when you're spending your action on your turn to which figures you move. You don't have to move all 3 of them. You don't have figures that get exhausted. If I've got 3 movement points, I could move this figure all 3, or I could divide those movements up among the different pieces in order to maximize my turn. Remember, I'm trying to manipulate the hedges and the board so that the groundskeeper is going to run into one of my opponent's figures. That's how I'm going to earn those victory points. What skills, though, are you practicing when you play Mythic Mischief? This is a game where it is purely strategic, so there's no luck, there's no probability here that you have to be curious about. It is a spatial puzzle that you're solving on every single turn. A puzzle that changes and evolves as the game plays, because characters are going to, werewolves can fling hedges across the board or fling characters 2 spaces away. So the pieces are going to be moving, and at the start of each turn, you have a puzzle to solve. How am I going to keep my own figures out of the path of the groundskeeper and force my opponents into the groundskeeper's path? So it's very much a visual spatial puzzle. You're using visual spatial problem solving skills. You're visualizing and predicting where do things need to be in order for the groundskeeper to hit those characters and earn you those 10 victory points, mischief points, that you need in order to win the game. Final thoughts about Mythic Mischief Volume 2. It's a gorgeous game. The components are gorgeous. The artwork is is great. The hedges, these plastic hedges, they have a texture to them. It's a great looking game. Now you can see I'm playing with the neoprene mat here, and this mat actually is double sided. I won't show you the other side because it's almost exactly the same, except the bottom of the map looks like, instead of a hedge maze, it looks like the inside of a library, because volume 1 is a library game where you're moving bookshelves instead of hedges. It's basically the same thing, but the pieces that are blocking your pathway are a little bit different. You've got these 4 new factions, and the stories behind them are funny. It was it was fun to read, who each of these guys are, and the fact that this little werewolf is the hall monitor. We love that. You've got the werewolf band that has a half moon guitar here, and the other fellow has a microphone. Like, the pieces are great looking. They're cute and they have a fun little story, and it's thematic. It fits with this idea that you're all these mythical characters who are students going to a school, and you're trying to prank your friends. So you've got a fun theme, you've got fun components and artwork, and then you've got this simple rule set with asymmetric gameplay that's completely strategic. There's no randomness at all, and you're building up what your figures can do and making some choices over how you're going to spend those tomes. Um, this is a great, beautiful game. It sucks you in immediately after you play one. You're probably going to want to play again. Maybe you're going to want to try a different faction so that you can test out those other legendary powers or the After Dark abilities that the characters get. You're going to want to use some new trick in order to get your friend into that game, the groundskeeper's path. This game was a lot of fun. It was super engaging, sucked us in, super easy to get started. You've got that tight space, that tight board, so that there's constant player interaction. And the interaction, even though it's take that, and maybe I just feel like I'm a player who doesn't really like take that very much, but it is that kind of take that, but the penalty isn't really severe. That's just how you earn the points. You don't even lose a turn with those characters that the groundskeeper catches. As soon as your next turn starts, you get to put those guys back out on the board. In fact, it could even be an advantage if all of the entry points are taken up and they're occupied when you're trying to put a figure back on the board. Well, then you get to put your figure back in any unoccupied space that you want. So there's no penalty there at all, except that your opponent gets a point for knocking your figure off. I really, really like the way that plays out. The dual layer player boards with the little dice, that's a clever way to keep track of your actions. And then the fact that you use the tomes to build that up as you go makes it fun too. You can think about and plan, oh, in my next game, I really want to make sure I have more movement points. That's what I wanted the most. Or we found ourselves as the game wore on, spending more points and boosting the distraction dice, which allow you to move the groundskeeper a certain number of spaces depending on how many of those points you spend. And then he's starting from a different point on the board, and you may be able to catch more of your. Boy, it was fun when you caught 2 characters in a turn. So what a great, beautiful game. I have to thank Jay Tatum for real again for recommending this one. It was not on my radar at all, but as soon as he suggested it to me, the Kickstarter came up soon after that. So it was in the back of my mind, and I saw the Kickstarter. It's taken me a year for the Kickstarter to deliver, and now I can talk about it and play it. But I played this one with my older son, and this is the kind of game that my younger son will adore. I know he's going to like the mythical characters. I know he's going to like the theme of being students at a school. He loved Harry Potter and Percy Jackson books when he was younger. And he is a spatial problem-solving game player. He loves these kinds of chess-style games. I mean, we used to play the Duke all the time. So this is a real winner for us. Great theme, great components, great gameplay that's easily accessible to even players who aren't super familiar with these kinds of games. It's easy to get the hang of it once you've played around. And then there's that deep strategy where you can try multiple different ways of winning. There's the asymmetric play, where even though it is asymmetric, you don't have to learn a whole new play style for each of these figures. There's just, their powers work a little bit differently, and you can try out different tricks here. What a winner. So Ivy Studios, you've created something special here, I think, in Mythic Mischief. I look forward to playing my next game with my younger son, like I said. If you have any questions or comments about Mythic Mischief Volume 2, you can leave them in the comment section below the video, or you can email me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where future episodes will go. Previous ones are up there already. Brains on Games is the X handle, and the Blue Sky handle is the Facebook page and the Instagram feed, so we're all over the place. And if you enjoyed this video, you want to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.